Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Science Buffs, the ultimate podcast for STEM enthusiasts. Sam, how is it going?
It's going pretty good. Not a lot
Good,
new
good.
since last week. How about you?
We've had some news, but tell me about your weekend first. We'll dive into the weekend update.
I think the biggest thing I did was I made pumpkin bread,
Let's go.
and I need advice because I made pumpkin bread, okay?
Yeah.
And then my family likes it without chocolate chip cookies or chocolate chips. I like it with the chocolate chips in
Yeah,
it.
you gotta have chocolate
So what
chips.
I, yeah, so I made these little ones and I put them, half of them, two of them had chocolate chips. Three of the little ones did not have chocolate chips. I put them all in. I cook them to perfection, the ones without the chocolate chips. I take them out. The ones with chocolate chips just deflated.
Oh no.
So I don't know like what the science is. We have to research this. Why
Huh.
is it that if you have chocolate chips, like, do you have to cook it longer?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah,
it's
we'll have
like
to look
more
that up.
dense. I don't know.
Maybe.
So I
My
was really
recipe,
sad.
yeah, that's disappointing. Did you still eat
I
them?
I still ate them,
Yeah,
which I
of
didn't
course.
feel great because I don't I don't think they were cooked all the way, but I
You're
was
just,
desperate.
you're just eating raw egg with chocolate chips, basically, at that point. Yeah, my only recipe
Yeah.
doesn't have chocolate chips, so I'm no help with the cooking, but it takes way too
Yeah.
long. I made pumpkin bread too, actually, and uh it took like I wanted like instant gratification. Takes like an hour to bake.
Did you pull it out halfway through and just like
Well, I was like, well, the crust is looking done. Like maybe the recipe's wrong. So then I stuck a toothpick, in the center, liquid. It's like, dang it. So I did end up waiting the full time, and it worked.
the toothpick lied to me though, because I
What?
toothpicked all of them. Yeah, and then I took them out and the chocolate chip ones deflated in the middle.
Was it squishy on the inside? Like it was it doughy?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
Lies.
I know the toothpick never lies. My mom even said the toothpick never lies. It lied to me.
What can
It
you,
was all right.
what can you trust anymore after the toothpick lies? I just
Nothing.
don't know. There's nothing you can trust. Good. Any other big events?
No, I've only read like 10 more pages in lessons in chemistry.
I was
I
gonna
haven't really
ask.
had a lot of time. I know I did meet the
Darn.
dog.
Okay,
So I've
good.
met the dog, but I had to Google spoilers because I was like, at the beginning,
Good.
she says that she's a single mom, and then they go into her love story, and I'm like, something is gonna happen.
Oh,
And I didn't
that
want to be
happens.
like emotionally bombarded, so I had to Google what happened.
I'm like,
So,
I don't know. I am assuming you're not this person normally, but I I used to, especially when I was a kid, go to the back like 3 pages of the book and read the back. Did you do that?
I do that, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
I wonder
Yeah.
what that says psychologically about
I
us.
think we don't like anything being uncertain in our lives.
That's so
Like,
true.
I cannot wait to get to the end of this book. I must know that it ends okay.
That must be why I've watched the same shows like 18 times because
Yeah,
I know what will happen.
yeah, me
The
too.
Office, Parks and
We're
Rec, New
we're
Girl.
rewatching Madam Secretary right now, and we just watched it like probably less than 6 months ago. But immediately after it was done, I was like, "So you want to just like start it again?"
Because we know what happens and I won't be emotionally destroyed.
We compromised on like waiting, I don't know, 3 months or something, but we still remember everything that happened. So I'm like, oh, this thing's about to get blown up.
Why is
So
it so
yeah,
comforting?
I know I'm not good at the surprises. So
So what's new with
cool.
you?
Well, I went to Michigan this weekend to visit
Yeah.
Jason's family. It was all really fun. We timed the leaves perfectly. Like every year they say we're not, it's going to be way earlier. So they said the peak was going to be like October 5th or something. And then, but we couldn't get there until, this last weekend. So like end of October. And it didn't peak until now. So it was awesome. I'll have to show pictures on stories, but
Yeah.
beautiful. Because in Colorado, it's basically like all aspens. Like if you go in the mountains, it's like pine trees or aspens, so it's all just yellow,
Like gold.
which is
Yeah.
nice. Like, it's cool, but like there's just so many varieties of trees that it's nice. So,
So you were leaf peeping, as we
yes.
call it here.
Yeah, it's always got a creepy vibe to
A leaf peeping.
me. I'm a leaf peeper. So then, okay, I got to tell you about my return. I've been saving to tell you this on the podcast because it's probably not even that big of a deal, but it was a big deal to me at the time. So we
Wait, let me guess what it
splurged.
was.
Okay, it was having to do with a
Did
flight
you?
mishap.
Oh, I was gonna say, did you see somebody famous?
Oh, no, sorry. We'll give you the general gist. Something on a
Okay, okay.
flight.
Well, all right, then I don't know.
Okay. Okay, I guess I gave you too big of a
Wait,
hint.
did you get upgraded?
Oh, the opposite.
How you got downgraded?
Okay, let me just start from the beginning. I'm really hoping that they can make this right because we are in the middle of like, I feel like a Karen, you know? I'm like calling
Oh my
the
gosh.
airline. Okay, so we splurged to come home and we upgraded to first class on the way home because well we got like a killer deal on it. It was only like $100 more or something than our normal flight. So we upgraded and we were like so hyped because with the baby there's a lot more room obviously and you get like a meal, all this stuff. So and
Yeah.
like free drinks, all of that. So we're hyped and we're at the airport and we're through security and all this stuff and we're passing all the food and we're like, oh, we shouldn't eat because we get a full meal on the plane. But I'm starting to get hungry as we're walking through the
Yeah.
airport. So I'm like, oh, Jason, check my reservation because we picked meals ahead of time, but I was like, I forgot what I ordered, so I want to know what I'm looking forward to on the plane. Like, what's my meal gonna be? I forgot. So he goes and looks and he's like, that's weird. Like, I think something's glitching because it's saying we're like 20C and 20D, which is not first class, or no, sorry, 20D and like 23F. So we're not together. But he's like, that's weird. We definitely got two seats together, first class. We walk past our gate, and the guy's like, hey, everyone, going to Denver. Gate change. You're like two gates down. So we're like, okay, it's kind of weird. Well, Jason goes, this is like 15 minutes before we take off. We finally like got settled, got to the gate. I'd gotten like a Diet Coke and stuff. So we had been kind of lollygagging here. We look and Jason's like, okay, well, I gotta go check you have to get like a tag for the stroller. So he goes and does that. He comes back and he's like, not good. We got downgraded and separated. So we're in not even like economy plus. We got downgraded to like just basic economy in like the back of the plane, separated
And
with a
they
baby.
still charge you?
Well, no. Well, I mean, so okay, so then we're like, wait, this is crazy. They're like, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. Go to customer service. So Jason goes over to customer service. They're like, I can't do anything. And now we're pre-boarding, so everything's locked, so I can't do anything. They basically offered to put us up in a hotel, but it's like in the middle of downtown Detroit, like at this not good hotel. And they wouldn't put us up at the nice hotel that was like in the airport, the Westin or whatever. So like I'm not leaving the hotel and Ubering with a baby. That's like just such a bigger hassle. Like I'll just at this point I just want to get home. So then on the flight, they're like, sorry, we had to downgrade to a smaller plane. I know some of you got downgraded. Just call customer service after the flight, get your refund. So they're just gonna all they want to do is give us the difference back between economy and first class plane, which was only like $100. And it was like, I didn't eat because I thought I was getting a meal. And hold on, they knew that the plane was going to be downgraded for like 3 hours because the plane never left Denver. And they told us like 15 minutes before takeoff where we couldn't do
That's
anything.
ridiculous.
So I sat with a squirming baby for like 2.5 hours in economy next to a sick person.
Oh
And I was
no.
like, he did fine. It all ended up okay. But I was like, I really hope they do something else besides just refund
So
like
have you
the
called them?
Yeah, and the wait's always like an hour and a half, and then you have to submit this online ticket, and they make it a whole rigmarole.
That would happen when somebody's traveling with a baby.
Yeah.
That's
But
ridiculous.
but then everyone around me too, I think were all the people that got bumped. So no one was sitting next to their party. So whatever computer program they have to reassign people, like they need some like computer science revamping
They
going on
do.
because literally like people were trying to help. They saw that I was separated from Jason and they're like, "Oh, can we swap around?" The only two people that were together were next to Jason, so they didn't want to separate and no one else had like a cohesive group together.
Two
Yeah,
that would switch.
everyone was
Oh my
separated.
gosh.
I was like, "This is a nightmare." So, but we're home and it was a great trip overall. We are
That's
leaf
ridiculous.
peepers, but yeah, the airlines are kind of a mess right now,
Yeah, you're
seems.
gonna have to tell me offline which airline this is because
Yeah,
I need to avoid it.
I know. At some point, I don't want to talk bad on the podcast in case they sponsor us one day. No, I'm just kidding.
Dreams.
Jason was like, "I'm never flying this airline again unless I like do something."
Oh my
But they're
gosh.
one of the only direct flights
Yeah.
from Denver to Detroit, so we don't have many
Everyone's gonna be
options. If
looking it up.
if things keep happening with different airlines, we'll have nowhere to fly. So
That
anyway,
is
but it was good.
ridiculous.
Oh,
Well,
the
I'm glad
trip
you made it
overall was
home
good.
though.
Yes, we're home, which is I got
Will's
Chick-fil-A as
like,
a
I
consolation
expect,
prize.
yeah. Oh my gosh.
So okay,
Yeah.
are you ready for the topic?
Yes.
Okay, I kind of forgot to actually put together my three clues, so I'm going to do it on the fly. I'm just realizing this now that I never actually wrote down my three clues. And you're totally going to guess it. So the
Ooh,
first clue is it has to do with homesteading.
beekeeping.
Yes.
Yay! Oh, I shouldn't have clapped. That was probably so loud. Sorry,
I knew you were going to
listeners.
guess it. This was actually kind of a suggestion by Sam to do. So, because anyway, so yeah, I'm
Well,
glad I didn't even have
background
to come up.
because we
Yeah, go
met
ahead.
for waffles one time, and you were telling me that you were going to do beekeeping, and you went into this crazy scientific explanation of beekeeping, and I was like, this is great. Like, the science behind how bees operate is so fascinating. And you
Yeah,
wouldn't even think about it.
it's pretty crazy. Like there are some things that just absolutely blew my mind about bees. So let's get into it since you guessed it right off the bat. Good job. Oh, wait, I forgot to mention we have merch. This
Yay!
is Science Buffs sweatshirt. So the link is on the website or on Instagram. So go buy them if you would like. They're cool. We can rep.
I love it. I know.
Okay.
I have like a non-merch one now. I
I
need one
know.
that has the
I got
merch.
yours. We'll tag up offline. Get you yours.
Exchange.
Okay. All right. Beekeeping. So bees are okay. Let me just back up and say my experience with beekeeping so far. So this is my first year beekeeping, and it is very intimidating to get started, but really, like everyone told me it wasn't that hard and it's like pretty manageable and kind of low maintenance. And I didn't believe them because I went and I took this beekeeping class before I got the bees. And honestly, it scared me so badly that I almost just backed out and said, I don't want any bees. Like, it's, they show you just like videos of swarms and places they get into and people like shaking bees into the thing. They're like, you can do it too. And it is just very intimidating. But if you are looking to get into beekeeping, it's not really too bad. And it turns out to actually be pretty fun. So I started beekeeping by going to this class. We have like a local beekeeping place that breeds them. And then uh basically you can also pick up the hive that you want from there and install them on your property, which that drive it's like 50 minutes away from my house. So at one point I was driving like 10,000 bees. in my trunk from like in a box for 50 minutes and I was panicked. But
That was the part I kept asking you about. That would give me so much anxiety. But do you have a picture of how you transported them? Because I
yes,
want
and
to
I will
see.
post it on the
Yeah.
stories. It's way better than actually what you'd think. It's just like a very contained box and it's actually not really that loud and so so it's easy. But so there's a couple ways to
Can you
actually
hear them though? Like a little bit?
I
You can hear
really
them in the
couldn't
like when they're buzzing in your car?
oh I really couldn't because well part of it was because the day that we picked him up was I think in April and it started snowing in Colorado. So
Oh, that's right.
they were really kind of like packed in there to keep warm. So I think I normally like on a warm day would have heard them, but I didn't really when it was closed up because it was cold. Um so there's a couple ways that you can actually acquire a hive. So in nature, you've probably seen the videos of like, beehives that they find their way into little nooks and crannies and there's like a very famous bee lady on TikTok who's just amazing and goes like no gloves, no equipment, just peeling honeycomb
Yeah.
off and finding the queen. Okay, I'm like so not even close to that level.
I've seen that. I've seen her. I think I sent the video. Like she'll just cup the bees, like
She
pulled bees, and she'll be like, "Oh, here's the queen," and she pulls it out.
yeah, she scoops with bare hands just bees into like cups and that's crazy. I don't understand. But and then sometimes she goes, "Oh, they're a little feisty today," and she'll like put on a glove. I have like the full hazmat suit on, and I'm still nervous. So,
That's crazy.
so anyway, there's a couple ways to get them not her way because she basically peels off the honeycomb from nature and then puts them in a box, and that becomes her hive. But the way I did it was I got what's called a nuke, and a nuke is basically so a hive, if you're a beekeeper, is just like a wooden box, and there's either 8 or 10 frames. And I'll show a picture of this on a story so people can see as a reference. But they're just like these wooden slats, and they have plastic in the middle, and they're kind of grooved like honeycomb, so it makes it easier for the bees to form their honeycomb on the grooves. And so you get this box with 5 of those and they have already started breeding and building the colony. So my bee shop basically bred the bees, started this colony, made sure the queen was like, taking control of the hive, and you kind of get a head start on it. So it's
You
easier.
know
So
how long that process is from like when they start the hive to like when you can take the hive home?
it was, I think, like a month. It was not
Oh, okay. I was
super
expecting
long.
so long.
No, I think they started like maybe 2 months, but it's in that same year. It's pretty quick. Um, so they start building, and like you have 5 of these frames in this nuke. 3 of them are starting to get some honeycomb on them. So basically, all I had to do was take that box and then literally like take out the frame from the nuke that they gave me and then just slot it into my hive that I had on my property. So I had already prepared that like empty boxes. So I just had to move them over. The queen was already good and my hive had started. So that's like, I think the easiest way to do it. There's also a method where people just get like a huge box of bees. If you already have like a whole hive kind of set up, but you don't want the whole nuke, you can just get a literally just a box crammed full of bees, and then they put the queen bee in this queen clip, so she's like separated from the rest of the bees, but still kind of with them. And you have to like introduce the queen, leave her in the clip for a little bit, put her in the hive, and then like a day or two later, take her out and make sure she assimilates with the rest of the hive. So those are the 2 methods of doing it. I think the nuke is easier and it gives you kind of a head start since they've already started building. You have more of a chance of harvesting some honey the first year. So that's how you get bees. Let's talk a little bit about like the whole science behind bees. And it's kind of interesting because I wanted to talk about the life cycle kind of a hive. And I don't know. If this gets confusing, ask me questions because there's a lot going on with the bees.
I love
So
it.
let's talk first about
Love.
the queen bee. This is the reproductive, or she's basically the reproductive organ of the entire hive. She does everything. I mean, she doesn't do everything, but she is the reason why there are new bees. So throughout the summer, the spring and summer, the queen bee will lay eggs and hatch a bunch of new bees. And so the population goes from like, I don't know, I think it was like 10,000 to, I believe it was 60,000, something like that. So
How long does a bee live for? Or like,
I have some articles about that. It
okay,
varies depending on the bee, but a queen bee can live about 4 to 5 years. Other
four to
types
five
of
years.
bees
Okay,
live like 4 months. So she's by far
okay.
the longest living bee in the hive.
So she has to
So,
reproduce a lot to keep her hive.
yes, yes. So she's laying all the eggs. So she can lay about 1,500 eggs per day. And the interesting thing about that, and this is what really blew my mind, bees can asexually and sexually reproduce. How is that possible?
Wow.
So, basically, here's the life of a queen bee. So we'll talk about the hatching and like how she becomes a queen bee a little bit later. But she hatches. She's gonna be the queen bee. Like early in her life, she needs to go on a mating flight. So at one point, all these drone bees, which are the male bees, all leave the hive pretty much at once, and they hover like up in the air. I forget what the how high, but it's like up 30 feet, let's say. They're all hovering up above. The queen bees, the young queen bees, go and just fly through the swarm of male bees. Now, the only real job of a male bee is to mate with a queen. So some of them never do, but on this flight, she's just flying through these swarms of male bees, and she'll mate like 7, 8 times. Like she'll mate a
Oh my
bunch of times.
gosh.
So what happens is basically the male bee will, you know, do the deed with the queen bee, and when he's done, he will try to like leave, and his whole abdomen is connected and it rips out and he dies. So once they mate, they're dead. So that's crazy. Um, and then she does that like a bunch of more times and she
Wait,
saves,
I have a question.
yes.
How do all these bees know when it's time for this mating flight?
Yeah,
Do you know how
they
they like communicate to each other?
I mean, there's some methods of like bee communication that they can observe. There's like this thing where they wag their butts. They kind of like bend down and wag their butts, and that, like
So
especially if
like
they're in
it's time.
danger. Yeah, like if the hive is in danger, you can see a lot of bees like wagging their butts and saying like, okay. And somehow they communicate, but I don't think a ton is understood about like the exact way that they know certain things like this. Maybe it's just like instinct, I guess, or certain communication signals, but I don't think a ton is known about the specifics. So,
Interesting.
so she'll mate with a bunch of these males. Like, I'll have to see. I think I have another article about how many there are, but she basically saves all the sperm in this compartment in her body. So it's all the eggs are not being fertilized at once. They're like it's all just being put into this one compartment. And she can basically then control the release of that. Like, this is
Wow.
crazy. So
And
when
she
she gets
just does
back,
this one time
she does one
and
mating
she's
flight, and that's it. And that is enough that will last her laying eggs for the rest of her life. So she goes back to the hive and she's starting to lay eggs. So like upwards of 90% of every hive is female. There's only like a very small percentage of male bees. And so if um, the queen fertilizes an egg and then lays it, it's going to become a female worker bee. If she only drops an egg not fertilized, it's a drone bee, which is a male bee. So that's how. She determines the sex of every bee in the hive. Isn't that
And
crazy?
does she do that consciously? Like, knows what distribution she kind of needs in her
Yeah, because
hive
at
to
different
maintain?
times of the hive's life cycle, you need more or less drone bees. And so, like, if we're getting to a time with they're gonna need to mate, like a new queen or whatever, she'll start laying more male bees, but most of the time she's laying female worker bees. Now, regular female worker bees can also lay eggs, apparently, and they'll always hatch male bees because they're not being fertilized. But I think that's like a rare occasion if the hive is in distress. So
That's crazy.
that's the queen, which, yeah, it's crazy. So, okay, then, and I'm a little bit confused about what royal jelly is, but it's like this substance that they go and forage for and create like within the body. But essentially, the way that a hive kind of collectively chooses a queen to create, because the way that a queen is made is there will be like, let's say, all these different cells with all these different eggs, with a bunch of different female eggs. The worker bees are going to feed a lot of them this royal jelly substance for a small portion of their stage as a larva, and then they'll be fed with like the regular nectar and honey and stuff. But the worker bees will somehow, and this is like another thing, I don't think they know how they communicate which one they want to choose, but the worker bees will choose like a cell and feed that cell the royal jelly throughout the entire portion of their the phase as a larva, like before they hatch. And so because of the royal jelly for an extended period of time, that bee becomes bigger and becomes a queen bee. So the hive like collectively chooses the queen and then makes her and then like
That's
helps
interesting.
her
Do they know
parent
the
her and stuff.
criteria for how a queen bee is like chosen?
No,
Or is
because
that not
it's
really known?
basically just any sort of, I mean they're all the same egg pretty much like that's being laid. It's just a female egg. And they say like, "Oh, it might be time for a new queen. So we need to make a new queen." So sometimes we'll do this a couple times in the hive, like there will be three or four queen cells. And we'll talk about that because it's really crazy how a new queen is chosen and like superseding events and stuff like that. Supersedures, I think it's called. Um, so that's coming up because
It's
there's
not a
some,
democratic vote.
oh my gosh, no, it's like a fight to the death. So, okay, so I mentioned the male bees. Um, let's see, there are 100 female workers for every one male drone bee. Let's see. Drones are incapable of feeding themselves or foraging for food. They lack stingers and they die immediately after mating.
So you would think, I mean, I guess my thing is like, the queen would just make drone bees right before she needed to mate, and then she wouldn't need any more ever, right? Unless they were trying to mate a new queen bee.
Right. Well,
Unless the drone bee,
hives kind of mix and match. Like they were talking about like mites and different predators and stuff, and they're saying, you're probably going to have mites because different bees will kind of mix back and forth between different hives. So like my neighbors have bees, they're probably all are mating, and then mixing within the colony. So some of my worker bees are probably in her hive and her, vice versa. So a lot of these they make male bees to also help mate other queens, not just herself. Because I don't think they're
got
mating
it.
within the same hive usually. I think they like kind of venture to go mate. But then the other fun
That
thing
makes
about
sense.
males is that when it's getting into wintertime or there's not enough food, they really serve no purpose if they haven't mated. So they're the ones that get kicked out of the hive. You'll see them getting like literally dragged out of the hive into the cold to like starve. And
Oh no.
and also in the winter, if they die in the hive, like the worker bees will drag them out of the hive dead and clean up the hive. So they don't have a great time, the male bees.
Oh no, poor drone bees.
Yeah. So, okay, then female bees. They're responsible, it says, for every job in the hive except for reproduction. And then they have some different roles based on what kind of worker bee you are. So there's a nursing bee, which they specifically care for larvae. Then there's ones that specifically attend to the queen. There's ones that specifically clean the hive. There's ones that clean other bees. Um, some build honeycomb, some cap the honeycomb, and we'll talk about all that later. But they each have kind of a specialized job within being a worker bee. They're also the ones that go out and forage. So, or is that, yeah. So they're the ones that go out and forage. Then they bring back, some of them will like clean off the nectar, pack it. So there's like a whole chain. It's like a big, what's it called? Like the line, production line to
Production
make
line.
honey and honeycomb and all the things that they need to do to survive for winter. So those are the roles of the bees within the hive.
I wonder how they are they all like physically the same? Like one bee that performs one function, is it the same as a bee that performs a different
Yes.
function?
Yeah, you can't really, from what I know at least, I mean, I'm not an expert. Again, this is my first year, but from what I can tell, they're all the same. They look the same. The only
And just
physical
get
difference
assigned.
is the queen bee. Yeah, a lot of
Because
this
like
is
how do
like
they
this
know their
innate
purpose?
system where they just like fall into some sort of instinctual thing
That's
and
so crazy.
and it all functions as a whole. It's amazing to understand. Okay, so then I mentioned that a queen bee lives like 4 to 5 years. So what happens to a hive when they need to get rid of their queen or when the queen's dying or whatever? They need to choose a new queen. There always has to be a queen in charge or else the hive will just die. So this is something called queen replacement. There's a couple different ways that queens can be replaced, and some of them are quite gruesome. So, yeah, let's go over them. So I found this great Quora article that just like laid it all out. Now there's some debate, I guess, within the bee community whether this is like a super procedure or like a swarm, and I'll go over those, but basically there's a couple different scenarios. So one, the queen has already died. She's really sick and about to die. She's ventured out, something's happened, like there's no queen. So the colony sees this and realizes they need to raise up a new queen. So they do the thing where they choose a cell, feed her royal jelly when and I mentioned that there could be like three or four. So one of them's going to hatch first, basically. And when the first one hatches, she goes around to the other queen cells and takes her stinger and just stabs the cells as many times as she can and kills all the other bees, all the other like queen cells. So she immediately just kills
That's crazy.
them. Yeah. So that is one way. So basically there's no queen and they kind of create one from scratch, basically. There's
Do you know how long they can function without a queen?
I
Until
don't know
like
a
can they
specific,
function at all?
but it's not more than a couple weeks because it only takes a couple weeks for the queen to hatch and everything. So they can turn around a new queen pretty quick, but if they go past that, the colony will die. So not very long. The other scenario is that there is a queen still in the hive, but she's like laying fewer eggs. It's getting to the end of her lifespan, and there's the laying pattern. There's a very specific laying pattern that they usually have, and it becomes sporadic. So the colony knows, okay, this queen is not doing well. We need a new queen. So same sort of thing happens where they can make different queen cells. The first one that hatches or emerges um, from the cell will kill the other queens, but then also they have to kill the current queen. So either the new well, it says, okay, as the new queen emerges, the colony's workers may attack the old queen, chew off her wings, and toss her out of the hive, or they may mob her or sting her to death. Um, the other thing that was described to me was they like swarm her and they call them like the hug of death, which is basically they just overheat her, like they cram around her until she's overheated and dies. Or there's something called the battle royale, where the queens just literally fight each other directly, and pretty much always the new queen wins because the old queen is like basically dying at this point.
Old and frail. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how they get rid of an existing queen. Now, the less
That is probably the worst possible way that you could die. Any of
yeah, you're like,
those
oh,
would be
the
pretty bad.
colony bees really are liking me. Like, why is it getting so hot?
Oh my gosh, I'm getting
Like,
so many hugs. Too
oh
many
my
hugs.
God, too many, too many. Yeah, so real bad. Okay, but then there's like a less gruesome way where basically there's a pheromone trigger that says that, there's a new queen that rises up. Because basically, I think it's every year the hive will create these queen cells. And so a new queen will come, and a lot of times what happens is the old queen will leave the hive and take like half of the worker bees with her and find a new place to build a hive. So that's called splitting a hive. In the there's like a whole beekeeping class I'm about to take on splitting the hive, because what you don't want is that swarm of bees to go somewhere you didn't predict. So like this is where when people end up with them in their houses or sheds or compost bins. And that's what the TikTok bee lady has to fix a bunch of times, is like when a swarm is not properly split, they just go find any random place to go start building. So in that case, the new queen rises up, the old queen just leaves, takes half the hive with her, and then they both build up the rest of their new colony. So that's like the peaceful way that they can settle it. So
You know how common that is? Is that less common than just getting rid of the old bee?
well, I think that's more common because the other two are basically like if the queen disappears, something has gone wrong. The other one is at the end of the queen's life cycle. So that's like only when she's done that swarming process like four times. That would be like on her fourth or fifth year when she's getting frail. That's when the competition really happens. So, um, so there's that. Let me just pull up this next
That's
thing.
crazy.
But yeah, so that's how the new queen is chosen. So then basically when she goes to her new hive, she'll lay in this very specific laying pattern. Um and they will hatch new bees, they'll go out and forage, and they'll come back and make honey. So let's talk about the process of making honey, because honey is what they use to survive throughout the winter, which I actually didn't know before. Did you know that?
So they eat their own honey.
Yeah, it's their food that they make and store up, which I
I don't think
never
I
knew.
knew that until you told me when you were getting bees. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I guess it makes more sense why now, like after learning about this, why some vegans will not, well, why some, I guess vegans always don't eat honey, right? But why maybe some vegetarians
I
or
don't
some
know
people
about
are
honey.
ethically opposed maybe to honey, because if you harvest too much honey, you're really taking away from the high quality food of bees. You can supplement with like sugar water or something like that, but some people they were talking about in the class basically just like dump their whole hive, kill all their bees, and harvest all their honey, and then just start over the next year because it's so easy to breed them. And from what I understand, it's not, the problem is not that bees are dying. I mean, bees are dying, but it's really easy to breed them. So there's not going to be like bees are going extinct. But what is happening is like their natural habitat is going more extinct. So that's the bigger issue. It's not necessarily that the bees themselves are dying. But some people are
Oh,
ethically
interesting.
opposed to gathering honey because it's the bees' um,
Food
food.
source.
Yeah. So here's the process
Which they told
for,
you that, right? They said
yes.
they said that you shouldn't harvest the first year, right? Because they wouldn't have enough food.
Oh
Was it the
yeah,
first year?
yeah, good call. So basically the structure of the hive, and I'll post a picture of this too, is I have two boxes that are that the bees have been building. So one of them, for me at least, has like a lot of the eggs, and the other one they've built pretty much all honey. And then what happens is like they need all that honey in the bottom two boxes for winter. And from what the bee people told me is like keep the two boxes, like don't harvest any from those two boxes because that's what they need. But if they're building at a really good pace, you can put another smaller box on top. And when they start building up there, that's like the extra surplus honey. And you can harvest
Yeah.
from that without taking their winter food. So for my first year, like it was touch and go. There's a possibility you could harvest honey. But my bees didn't build enough to build anything in the top box, so I'm not harvesting any for this year. So
Gotcha.
yes. Okay. And then let's just talk about how they turn nectar into honey, because that was pretty interesting. And then you can ask any questions. But okay.
Yay.
So basically, first step is the forager bee goes and finds a flower. So the honeybee alights on the flower, unfolds her long tongue, which can reach half of her body length, by the way, very, very long tongue, and puts it into the petals or the center of the flower to drink the nectar. Okay, she then stores the nectar in what's called her honey stomach. And she goes from flower to flower until her honey stomach is completely full and she flies back to the hive.
Does that imply that she has more than one stomach?
Yeah, I believe she has a couple different stomachs, but this is kind of like her store, kind of like the queen bee has the extra compartment to like store all the sperm. She has it too, specific to her
I wish I had an
job.
extra stomach.
I know, that'd be nice, especially
I
for
want a
just
honey
honey.
stomach.
Okay, so
One
nectar.
honey stomach, one avocado stomach, and one potato
Yeah,
stomach.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so nectar is around 80% water, and the rest is like sugars and other, ingredients that comes out of the flowers. And so the bees have to turn it into honey, and honey is only 18% water. So there's this whole system. So enzymes within the bee's honey stomach start breaking down the sugars into this simple sugar. So it goes from a more complex sugar to a simpler sugar, and that's called inversion. And then they re-enter the hive, and the forager, uh, it says regurgitates, which is like such a gross word, but the forager regurgitates the nectar onto a house bee, and a house bee
And
then
the process
ingests
has
that.
already started,
Yeah, so it
right?
started
Because the
breaking down. So
process
they
of it
fill,
changing.
yeah, so they fill up the honey stomach. It starts breaking down already. They get back to the hive. It's like a simpler form. They then regurgitate it. They like baby bird it to this house bee. The house bee ingests it and ingests it. It breaks it down further into her honey stomach. So it's a multi bee process. Then the house bee regurgitates that into a cell where the honeycomb has been built. So that's why you see like the honeycombs that are kind of like all filled with honey, basically. So they like regurgitate it all back into a cell. And then house bees will fan the nectar with their wings. So the water evaporates. And so it turns from the 80% water content to 18%, which makes it into honey. And then they cap it with wax to keep it sealed in there for winter.
That must be a lot of energy for the bees to just like fan it with their little tiny
I know they're just
wings.
like, at least, yeah, yeah, they must be fanning for a really long time.
I was gonna say the forager bees have the hardest job because they have to fly so far. But the house bee, is it the house bees that fan it with their wings?
Yeah, the house bees.
Well, they're getting their exercise too, I
I know they're
guess.
like, okay, they're staying lean. So, um, so yes, so that is the process of turning it into honey. And then in the winter, when they're not foraging or bringing in anything, then they will tap into those honey stores, and that's how they survive the winter. And then in the winter, they just like huddle all together really close. They don't hibernate, like they don't take down their activity level. They just kind of collapse in, and all are kind of vibrating together, so it's really warm in there, and they keep the hive warm. The outside is a very tightly packed kind of sphere of bees, and then the middle is the um, looser packed bees, and that's where the queen is. And so that's how they keep warm for winter. But I think
Like the queen is like, is this practice for my suffocation?
I know. She's
But
like,
they make sure
I'm
not to suffocate her.
yeah, she's like, I'm getting very suspicious. She's like, it is my fourth year. I'm getting a little weak. They're like, it's fine. We're just prepping for winter. Calm down. So I
Oh,
think that's pretty much all. I mean, obviously there's a million things to learn about bees, but those are the basics of how a hive works and how it all goes down, how they survive through the winter, and some beekeeping. So
that's crazy. I do have one question. Do you know
yes.
honeycomb structure? Like, why is it that shape?
Oh, so I might need to fact check this and put it in the stories, but what I heard is that they make circles. They just keep making circles. But when you stack a ton of circles together and then the pressure, like the weight, it turns into the hexagon shape.
Interesting. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So that's at least the theory. Although, and actually, yeah, my imprints, I believe, because the inserts of the frames come with like a grid, and I believe they are circles with like filler kind of in the gaps. So I think they just make circles and it just kind of morphs into a hexagon.
That's interesting. Do you have, if you have pictures, we should post them on stories.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely have some pictures, and my bees have like filled the whole top box with honey, and then they actually I didn't check it very much during the summer because I was a little scared. And they have like they have like welded the top frames and the bottom frames together. So if I try to pull off the top box, all the frames of the bottom box come up because there's just like honeycomb connecting all of it. So over the winter, I'm gonna have to go in
Wow.
and scrape it and clean it up a little bit. Um, but yeah,
That's
that's like all
crazy.
connected in this crazy structure, which is pretty wild.
So when's the earliest you could get honey,
I could have gotten
do you
honey in
think?
September. Um, well, if I had gotten enough. So next year, like in the spring, or during the winter, I'll go clean up the hives. We'll treat for mites, and then probably split the hive or add more boxes. You can do that too, but I'll probably end up splitting the hive and having two. Then they'll build it up through spring and summer, and then you harvest around like August, September. Now, this also, if you're a beekeeper and those dates are very wrong, this is just what I was told about Colorado bees because my I have family members like in Europe and they harvest theirs way earlier than what people were doing here. And I was all confused, but I think it's like a weather thing about like when they can start foraging and stuff like that. In Colorado's is pretty late because of our late snow.
Interesting.
So
Do the
yeah,
mites attack the bees or their food source?
they attack the bees and they actually attack the larvae. So when they lay eggs, they cap them and they'll like go into the larva cell and like attach to the larva and the baby bees. And
Oh,
you have to treat like once or twice a year usually, especially because all the bees are kind of like intermixing with different hives. So there tends to be mites kind of everywhere, from what I understand. So I did get too
that's
scared to
interesting.
actually test for mites because the way you test for mites is you scoop like 300 bees into a cup, fill it with alcohol, and shake them around and kill like 300 bees. And the mites, because of the alcohol, it causes the mites to fall off the bees and you can count them. So if you have like a certain number of bees per 300, a certain ratio, then you need to treat for mites. And I
So
did
you
not do
kill
that.
300 bees
Yeah, pretty
to
much.
test
You
to
also,
save the
though,
rest of the
have,
population.
yeah, so many bees, and you're going to kill some bees even when you just open the lid and check them. Like if you're moving anything, you're going to kill some bees. So
Really?
it's a sacrifice for the rest of the hive. But they were saying this is the scary part too. Like I was going to test because my hive is so separated. Like I have honey on the top and the reproduction stuff is really happening on the bottom. I was going to take the bee sample from the top because I knew the queen wouldn't be in there. I'm really bad at identifying the queen. It was supposed to come marked from the company that gave me the bees, and they had some mix up and it's not marked. So I'm really bad at finding the queen. But I read online that to get an accurate mite count, you have to take it from the frames that are like the reproduction is happening. So the queen could just be
So you don't
in
want to kill
there.
the
I don't want to
queen.
kill the queen. So I was just like, I'm just going to assume that there's mites because they said basically there's going to be, and I'm just going to treat as if there are mites. So,
So how do they mark the queen?
oh, there's a whole crazy process that they were showing us where basically you can find her because she's a little bit bigger, but I mean, you still have to have a pretty good eye. But if you find her, there's this tube that you can buy, and it's crazy. You kind of just like you put her in there, and it's kind of like a plunger, like a syringe, and you kind of just syringe her to the back of the tube, and there's like a paint little thing on there, and you just kind of like squeeze her against the back, and she gets paint on her back, and then you just release her back into the
Oh,
hive. So she was supposed to come with a big
interesting.
red dot on her back, but it didn't quite work how they wanted to. I think they marked like the
That's
wrong set
crazy.
of hives or something. So mine did not come with it.
Maybe a hive has two queens and yours had to be like reborn.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like it seemed to be working for my lack of oversight. I barely checked. So but they're kind of self-sufficient. And that's what people were really correct, where they're really not high maintenance. If you get them transferred, they're kind of hands off until treating for mites or harvesting honey. So they're pretty easy. Quick story before we go. I went out there the other day and I was like, wow, I'm so glad I have this bee suit on. Like I love having this bee suit. I feel so safe. I'm not even panicked at all. And I like looked down and I realized I forgot to zip up the neck part of my bee
Oh
suit.
no.
And so I look down, there's just like holes right by my head. And I'm like fully trying to move the box, like the full top box off the hive. They're not happy. They're swarming around everywhere. And my head part is just like it's like overlapping, but it's not zipped. Like they could have totally gotten in right by my
They
face.
didn't.
Well, no, because I was just like, if I panic now and I try to close it, they're gonna know, and I'm gonna get stung on the face. So I just kept going. I just pretended it was zipped and tried not to panic,
Oh my gosh.
and it worked. I didn't get stung, but it was like a miracle.
Have you ever been stung?
No, not yet.
In your life, you've never been stung by a bee?
Oh, one time I got stung. I think it was maybe a wasp because I didn't see a stinger. But I literally was just driving down this Michigan road, rolled down the window for like 3 seconds. A bee flew in, stung my inner thigh, and left. I was like, what the heck?
Do they die after they sting you?
Yes. Oh yeah, that's a good thing. There's a barb on the stingers. Well, so the queen bee can sting as many times as she wants. There's no barb, so she does not die, but she's also pretty much never outside the hive. So she doesn't really need to sting anything other than the other
Except
queens
for
that
other
she's
queen bees.
killing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's convenient. The other ones do have a barb, and so their like insides will rip out once the stinger comes out, and so they'll
Is
die
it,
once they sting.
do the females also have stingers? Am I
Yeah,
making
the
this up?
females are the ones that
Okay.
have the stingers. Males don't even have stingers in their
Oh, okay. So I had it
continuing
backwards.
of being useless. It's all the females that have stingers and they die immediately. Pretty much any bee you've ever seen is a female. The
That's
males
crazy.
basically don't leave except for their one mating flight and they're too high to really, they're not the ones landing in your drink or anything.
That's in your tree. That's crazy. I have been stung many times in my life.
Yeah, hasn't it always been
I
that
don't
like
know.
pools you were saying?
Yeah, I was a swimmer growing up, so I spent a lot
That
of
makes
time
more
outside in
sense.
the summer. But like, I remember my parents have a crabapple tree, so
Oh
I used to
yeah.
help them like pick up the crab apples, and I did it barehanded a few times, and they stung me between the fingers.
How many
So that
times would
wasn't
you say
fun.
you've gotten stung?
I've probably been stung 4 to 5 times, so I'm certainly
Okay.
not allergic.
That's,
But
I mean, that's good to know. I was really
yeah,
panicking on the Michigan drive because I wasn't sure if I was allergic or not. So I was just like monitoring, like, am I
yeah, you're
good?
like, am I gonna die? I know you didn't mention the fact that when you went to go pick up your beehive, you were super pregnant and you hadn't
Oh,
been stung before, right? And I was worried. I was
right.
like, should you be in a car and you don't with
I
bees and you're pregnant?
They did say they're like no shame if you want to show up in your bee suit, like you can, and we won't judge you if you're really nervous. I resisted the urge to do that, but I did stock up on Benadryl and locate my EpiPen before I went, so I was prepared. But also my doctor said, and this is kind of interesting. If you don't know if you're allergic, it's very, very rare that the first sting will be like an anaphylactic shock situation. Usually
Really?
you'll have like a sting and it'll be, some sort of reaction. And if it's bad, maybe that's a signal you're allergic to bees. But usually the first sting is not, you're not going to go into shock. You don't need the EpiPen for that um
So you're not out of the
situation.
clear yet. You need to be stung one more time to
Right.
be
Although
sure.
I like had no reaction basically the one time I got stung, so I think I'm okay.
It
But
hurts.
yeah, it's not
So that's a
fun.
bad reaction.
It is not. Anyway, that's
That
bees. That's
sounds
our
worse.
topic for the week.
Yay, that was a really good topic. I'm glad you did it.
I'm glad you suggested it because this is one of my passions now.
I
So
love it.
good, good, good. I'm glad. Well, thank you everyone for watching. And make sure to subscribe on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. Follow us on Instagram. We need some followers over there. We are putting out some good reels. So go follow us
Yes.
over there, follow us on your platforms, and share us with a friend so we can grow our science buffs community. And in the meantime, we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.